Emma and Daniel seemed like the picture-perfect couple. Emma, a freelance investigative journalist, had spent years uncovering corruption and deceit, but she never expected it to hit so close to home. She grew up in a family of reporters, her father once exposing a government scandal that led to a political downfall. It was in her blood to dig for the truth, though she never thought she'd be doing it in her own relationship. Daniel, a successful financial consultant, carried an air of charm and confidence that made people trust him instantly. He was an orphan raised by his uncle, a once respected businessman who mysteriously disappeared after allegations of fraud. Daniel rarely spoke of his past, brushing off any questions with a simple, "I learned to fend for myself early." His smile was always reassuring, until the cracks began to show. As Emma and Daniel sipped coffee at a cafe, walked hand in hand along the beach, and danced at a glamorous party, Emma's voiceover played. Daniel was everything I ever wanted, kind, charming, and perfect, or so I thought. Daniel was known for his dedication, both at work and at home. As a financial consultant, his days were packed with client meetings, investment planning, and managing high-stakes portfolios. Yet he always made time for Emma, cooking dinner on weekends and helping with household chores. His reliability was one of the things Emma loved most about him. But lately, things had changed. Daniel started coming home late more often, claiming work emergencies. His phone would buzz during dinner, and he'd step into the other room to take the calls, his voice low and urgent. His once open and affectionate demeanor grew distant, and the warmth in his eyes seemed to dim. One evening, he canceled their date last minute, the third time in 2 weeks. Emma tried to suppress the uneasy feeling growing inside her, convincing herself it was just a busy season at work. But her instincts whispered that something was off. Later that night, as she folded laundry, a crumpled receipt fell from Daniel's jacket pocket. She picked it up, her heart skipping a beat as she read the name, the Grand Harbor Hotel. She'd never heard of it before. Why would Daniel be there when he said he was working late? Emma's pulse quickened. Rationality urged her to let it go, but her investigative nature wouldn't allow her to ignore the signs. She tucked the receipt into her pocket, her mind already racing with questions. She decided to investigate. Emma couldn't shake the suspicion gnawing at her. The next morning, she searched for the Grand Harbor Hotel online. Driven by a need for answers, Emma called the hotel, hoping to learn more about the night from the receipt. But the receptionist offered no information, citing privacy policies. Even more puzzling, when Emma checked Daniel's credit card statements, there was no record of a payment to the hotel. That evening, unable to resist the urge to dig deeper, Emma followed Daniel after he left the house. She trailed his car through the suburban streets until it slowed and stopped in front of a modest home just a few blocks away. Emma parked discreetly down the street, her hands trembling as she watched Daniel step out of his car. Clutching a key, Daniel approached the front door and unlocked it with practiced ease. Moments later, a woman appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up with a smile. A little girl, no older than 5, rushed into Daniel's arms, giggling as he lifted her off the ground. Emma's breath hitched, her vision blurring with tears as she captured the scene on her phone. She stared at the image on her screen, heart pounding in her chest. The man she loved, the man she thought she knew, was living another life just down the street. And now there was no turning back from the truth she had uncovered. Shattered, Emma couldn't let it rest. She needed to understand why Daniel lived this double life. Emma confronted Daniel that night, her voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "Who is she, Daniel? Who is that little girl?" Daniel's face paled, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes hardened. "Why are you following me, Emma? Don't turn this around on me. I need to know the truth." He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "That's my family. Her name is Sarah, and the little girl is Lily, my daughter." Emma's chest tightened. "You've been lying to me this whole time?" "I never wanted you to find out this way," he said, his tone flat, devoid of the warmth she once knew. "But this doesn't concern you. My double life is none of your business or theirs. Just let it go, Emma. Not everything needs to be investigated." Tears stung her eyes. "You think I can just walk away from this? From knowing the man I love is living a lie?" Daniel stepped closer, his gaze cold and unwavering. If you know what's best for you, you'll stay away from them. This doesn't have to get more complicated. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, torn between heartbreak and the burning need to uncover the full truth. But one thing was clear. Daniel's secrets ran deeper than she ever imagined. Emma couldn't let it go. The questions gnawed at her, refusing to be silenced. How long had this been going on? Who was Sarah, really? Determined to find answers, she dove into Sarah's past, scouring social media, online archives, and public records. Hours of searching led her to a series of old social media posts dating back 6 years. The photos showed Sarah smiling beside a man, and Emma's breath caught in her throat when she recognized him. It was Daniel's uncle, the man who had mysteriously disappeared 8 years ago. Emma zoomed in on the image, her mind racing. What was Daniel's uncle doing in photos taken 2 years after he supposedly vanished? The implications sent a chill down her spine. She needed to know more. Digging deeper, she found mentions of a business the uncle had started before his disappearance, one that had ties to shadowy financial dealings. The more Emma uncovered, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Daniel's double life wasn't just about a secret family. There was something far darker beneath the surface. Staring at the screen, Emma knew she couldn't walk away now. She needed the full truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. Emma's determination deepened. She tracked down the lead investigator from Mason Harley's disappearance case, Detective Rachel Monroe, a seasoned investigator known for her tenacity. Emma found her contact information and called, her fingers trembling as she waited for an answer. Detective Monroe, a firm voice answered. "Detective, this is Emma Reynolds. I'm looking into the disappearance of Mason Harley. I think I've found something." There was a pause. "That case went cold 8 years ago," Monroe said cautiously. "No one ever found out what happened to him, but there were suspicions, overseas crime connections, money laundering. Why are you looking into this now?" Emma's throat tightened. "I think my husband Daniel might be involved." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Monroe spoke, her tone sharpened with interest. "Meet me tomorrow at my office. But be careful, Miss Reynolds. If you're right, you're stepping into dangerous territory." Emma hung up, her mind spinning. The threads of Daniel's double life were weaving into something far more sinister than she could have imagined. And now, there was no turning back. That night, the front door burst open with a crash, and Daniel stormed into the house, his eyes blazing with fury. "Didn't I tell you to stay out of it?" he bellowed. "You called that Monroe woman today." Emma's breath hitched. "How do you know that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm not watching you," Daniel said, stepping closer, his face inches from hers. "But other people are." Emma's mind raced. "What does that mean? Does this have something to do with your uncle?" Daniel's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "I'm warning you, Emma. Drop this. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Before she could respond, he spun around and slammed the door behind him, leaving Emma standing in the silence, her heart hammering against her ribs as the weight of his words settled over her like a cold shadow. Daniel didn't come home that night, leaving Emma alone with her swirling thoughts. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend, Elaine. "Hey, you and Daniel free this weekend? Barbecue at our place? Should be fun." Emma hesitated. She wanted to decline, but she knew Elaine would ask questions if she did. After a long pause, she typed back, "Sure, we'll be there." Saturday arrived, and the air buzzed with laughter and the sizzle of food on the grill. Emma forced a smile, making small talk while her eyes kept drifting toward Daniel. He seemed relaxed, but there was tension beneath the surface. As soon as they had a moment alone, Daniel pulled her aside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. Emma folded her arms. "What now?" Daniel glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "My uncle showed up a few months ago," he confessed. "We met at the hotel. He asked me to watch over Sarah and Lily, said he needed to disappear for a while." "Disappear?" Emma echoed. "He's in trouble," Daniel admitted. "Sarah doesn't know about his past, and I've been trying to keep her safe. That's all this is." Emma stared at him, her mind spinning with questions. But before she could press for more, someone called their names, and the moment slipped away, leaving her with more questions than answers. In the days that followed, Emma and Daniel kept up appearances, acting as though tension had driven a wedge between them. Their conversations in public were clipped, their glances sharp with feigned resentment. Neither knew who might be watching, but both sensed unseen eyes lingering in the shadows. Emma, determined to maintain contact without drawing suspicion, asked a trusted co-worker to buy her a burner phone. With this untraceable line, she and Daniel could exchange brief messages and arrange clandestine meetings. The phone became a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting them amid the growing danger. Meanwhile, Detective Rachel Monroe intensified her investigation. Files from the cold case resurfaced on her desk, their faded pages whispering of unanswered questions. Connections to overseas crime syndicates hinted at a web of corruption that stretched far beyond what anyone had suspected. Every lead brought her closer to the truth, but also closer to the unseen forces determined to keep that truth buried. As days passed, Emma's nerves frayed under the constant tension. The burner phone buzzed late one night, and her pulse spiked as she read Daniel's message. "We need to meet. It's not safe to talk here." The cryptic words left her breathless with both fear and anticipation. She knew the next step would bring them closer to answers, but also deeper into the danger that now surrounded them both. The following weekend, Emma and Daniel packed their bags and drove to Dallas under the pretense of visiting her family. The tension between them was palpable, though to anyone watching, they appeared as a couple, trying to mend their strained relationship. The long stretches of highway passed in silence, punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the occasional glance from Emma, searching Daniel's face for answers he hadn't yet shared. They checked into a boutique hotel near downtown Dallas, its grand lobby bathed in warm, golden light. The concierge greeted them with a smile, oblivious to the turmoil beneath their composed exteriors. Their suite, with its elegant decor and cityscape view, was a stark contrast to the gravity of their meeting. But the adjoining room held the answers Emma had been chasing. As the clock approached midnight, a soft knock echoed through the room. Daniel crossed the space, unlocking the door to reveal Mason Harley, taller and leaner than in the photos Emma had found, but with the same piercing eyes and air of quiet authority. The lines on his face hinted at years spent looking over his shoulder. "Come in," Daniel said, stepping aside. Mason entered with a cautious glance toward Emma. "You must be Emma. Daniel told me you're determined to get to the bottom of things." Emma stood her ground, her pulse racing. "Why did you ask Daniel to lie? Why all the secrecy?" Mason sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't have a choice. A few months ago, I made a deal with the FBI. They're building a case against the syndicate I got involved with years ago. If I cooperate, they'll ensure my family is protected." "Then why involve Daniel?" Emma pressed. "Because I needed someone I could trust to watch over Sarah and Lily until this is over," Mason replied. "Sarah doesn't know the truth about my past, and I want to keep it that way if I can. But now I need Daniel to tell her what's happening, enough so she understands why I had to disappear. Before the FBI takes me into protective custody, I need to know if she's willing to see me one last time." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she absorbed the weight of Mason's words. The web of lies and half-truths had been spun not out of malice, but from a desperate attempt to protect those they loved. Yet the danger still loomed, and the choices they faced would shape the future for all of them. Daniel placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, grounding her in the moment. "We'll do what we can, Mason," he said quietly. "But this has to end soon. Too many people are watching." Mason nodded, his gaze steady. "I know, just make sure Sarah and Lily stay safe. That's all that matters now." As Mason retreated to the adjoining room, Emma and Daniel stood in the silence of their suite, the city lights casting shadows across their faces. The next step was clear, but the risks had never been higher. 2 weeks later, Sarah agreed to meet Mason at a secure office building arranged by the FBI. Her heart pounded as she sat across from him, anger and heartbreak etched on her face. "You lied to me for years," she said, her voice trembling. "But you're still my husband. We're a family. I love you, Mason. If you have to go away, I'll go with you, wherever that is." Tears welled in Mason's eyes. He reached across the table to take her hand. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I just wanted to protect you and Lily." Before he could say more, footsteps echoed down the corridor, followed by muffled voices. The door burst open as FBI agents swarmed in. The room erupted in chaos. Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with terror as agents shouted commands. One seized her by the arm, pulling her to her feet. "Sarah Harley, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial crimes, aiding and abetting an obstruction of justice." No, this isn't happening. I haven't done anything," she cried, her voice breaking with panic. "Stay calm, Sarah," Mason shouted, struggling against the agents who held him back. His voice cracked with anguish as he watched her being taken away. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law," the lead agent recited as Sarah sobbed uncontrollably. Her hands trembled as they were cuffed behind her back. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you." "No, I didn't know. Please, I swear I didn't know." Sarah's cries echoed through the corridor as they led her out, heels clattering against the tile floor. Cameras flashed outside, and reporters swarmed, their voices overlapping as they shouted questions. Blinded by tears and camera flashes, Sarah struggled to process what was happening. From a second-floor window, Mason watched, his fists clenched at his sides. His breath came in ragged gasps as guilt and helplessness threatened to overwhelm him. His past had finally caught up with his family, and this was the price. Across town, Daniel and Emma sat at their desks, unaware of the storm that had broken. It wasn't until Daniel's phone buzzed with a coded message from Mason that the weight of what had happened sank in. Back at the FBI field office, Detective Rachel Monroe watched from behind a glass partition, her expression unreadable. She had helped orchestrate the entire operation. The staged arrest, the media frenzy, all of it designed to sever Sarah's ties to the outside world, until the case was complete. Yet as she turned away from the chaotic scene, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Had they pushed too far? Only time would tell. Hours later, Sarah sat in the back of an unmarked vehicle, her wrists still aching from the handcuffs. Confusion and fear weighed heavily on her chest. The vehicle stopped, and an agent opened the door, helping her step outside into the cold night air. Before her stood a modest, nondescript house surrounded by dense trees. Inside, her breath caught in her throat as she saw Lily sitting on a worn leather couch, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Mommy!" the little girl cried, running to her. Sarah fell to her knees, holding Lily tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mason stepped into the room moments later, his face etched with guilt and relief. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Sarah. Lily." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with conflicting emotions. "How could you let this happen?" she choked out. "How could you put us through this?" "I had no choice," Mason said, kneeling beside them. "I never wanted any of this. I thought I could protect you by staying away, but it only made things worse." Lily clung to both of them, sensing the intensity of the moment, even if she didn't understand the words. Her small voice broke the tension as she whispered, "Don't cry, Mommy. Don't cry, Daddy." Sarah pulled Lily close, her heart breaking as she whispered, "It's going to be okay. I promise." But before they could say more, an agent stepped forward. "We need to move. There's another location ready. We can't stay here long." Sarah's pulse pounded as she clung tighter to Lily. Mason's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "We'll go. Just let us have one more minute." As the agents gave them a moment of privacy, Sarah and Mason exchanged a look, an unspoken vow that, no matter what happened next, they would face it together. Meanwhile, miles away, Daniel and Emma remained unaware of the unfolding events, their world still untouched by the storm closing in around them. Days later, Detective Rachel Monroe called Emma and Daniel to her office under the pretense of gathering more information about Mason and Sarah. Sitting across from them, she maintained a professional demeanor, though her eyes held a hint of something unspoken. "I appreciate you both coming in," she began. "I need to ask a few more questions regarding Mason and Sarah." Emma and Daniel exchanged a wary glance. "We've told you everything we know," Daniel replied. Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Sarah and Mason have been relocated to a secure location. They're safe, but we need you to continue acting as though you have no knowledge of their whereabouts." Emma's breath hitched. Relief and confusion collided within her. "They're safe?" she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Daniel tensed beside her. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because the fewer people who know the details, the safer they are, Rachel replied. This situation is volatile. The press and those involved in Mason's past are watching closely. Any slip-up could jeopardize everything. The weight of the request settled over them. Emma swallowed hard, nodding despite the turmoil churning inside her. Daniel pressed his hand against hers beneath the table, a silent gesture of solidarity. In the days that followed, the media frenzy intensified. Cameras and reporters seemed to be everywhere, their questions relentless. Headlines speculated about Sarah's supposed crimes, Mason's disappearance, and Daniel's possible involvement. The pressure weighed heavily on both Emma and Daniel. Whispers followed them in grocery aisles and at work, their once private lives laid bare for public consumption. One night, as Emma watched the latest news broadcast, she whispered to Daniel, "How much longer can we keep pretending?" Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "As long as it takes to keep them safe." Outside, unseen eyes watched from the shadows, reminding them that the danger was far from over. That night, as Emma and Daniel slept, the creak of a floorboard echoed through the darkened house. Emma stirred, her eyes snapping open as adrenaline surged through her veins. A faint shuffle of footsteps sent her heart pounding in her chest. "Daniel," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He woke instantly, his senses on high alert. Before he could respond, the bedroom door burst open, silhouetting a masked figure against the dim hallway light. "Get behind me," Daniel shouted, pushing Emma toward the corner of the room. The intruder lunged forward, but Daniel tackled him, both men crashing to the floor. Furniture overturned as they struggled, fists colliding with dull thuds and ragged breaths echoing through the air. Emma scrambled to the nightstand, fumbling for her phone when another figure appeared. She gasped as the man grabbed her arm. But she twisted free, adrenaline lending her strength. Before she could scream, the sound of shattered glass and heavy footsteps thundered through the house as FBI agents stormed in. "FBI, hands in the air!" An agent barked, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the room. Chaos erupted as the intruders tried to flee, but the agents moved swiftly. Shouts filled the air, followed by the click of handcuffs and the metallic clink of weapons hitting the floor. Daniel gasped for breath, pushing himself to his feet as the lead agent approached. "You're safe now. We've been monitoring the property. These men have ties to Mason's former associates. They won't be bothering you again." Emma collapsed into Daniel's arms, her body trembling as the weight of the moment settled over her. Tears streaked her cheeks as she clung to him, the night's terror slowly giving way to relief. As the agents led the captured intruders out, Detective Rachel Monroe stepped into the room. "It's over," she said, her gaze steady and resolute. "You did well, both of you. It's finally over." Daniel held Emma tightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. For the first time in months, hope began to take root in their hearts as the dawn of a new chapter slowly broke on the horizon. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a fragile sense of normalcy. The media frenzy slowly faded, and the shadows that once seemed to lurk around every corner began to dissipate. Emma and Daniel rebuilt their lives, finding solace in each other after months of deception and danger. Detective Rachel Monroe visited them one final time. "Mason and Sarah are safe, and Lily is thriving. The case is officially closed. You're free to move forward without looking over your shoulders." Emma's eyes welled with tears of relief. "Thank you for everything." Rachel gave a small, knowing smile. It was never just about the case. It was about protecting families. Months later, Emma and Daniel stood on a quiet beach at sunset, the golden hues of the sky reflecting on the waves. Holding hands, they watched the horizon, feeling the weight of the past finally lift from their shoulders. Emma whispered, "We made it through." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Together, as the sun dipped below the horizon, their silhouettes stood strong against the fading light, a symbol of resilience, love, and the promise of a future unburdened by secrets. Hope you enjoyed this exciting story full of suspense and drama by Green Tea Tale. Please help our channel grow, so like, share, and subscribe.